Humility is a virtue. It is a great value that people aspire towards. But what does it mean to be humble? And is humility one size fits all? Are there possibly different kinds of humility? That's what we're going to learn today. This is Likutei Sichos Chelek Yud Gimel, the 13th volume of the Rebbe Sichos, the second Sicha on Parashas Behaalosecha, which also is the conclusion of the tractate Soita. In other words, the Rebbe analyzes the end of the tractate Soita in a comment that is made in the Talmud at that point and relates it to what we learn about in the parasha. Ala pasuk va'aish Moshe onav mo'od mikol adam asher al penei ha'adama. So we're going to analyze the verse in this week's parasha that says that Moses was the most humble person who ever lived on the face of the earth, more so than any other person. When you think about it, it really doesn't seem to make any sense that we say Moshe was more humble than any other person who ever lived. Number one, Moshe was the person who received the Torah directly from God on Mount Sinai. He spent 40 days and nights on that mountain, Hashem speaking to him directly, personally coaching him and teaching him all of the Torah and giving him the Torah to be the custodian to receive it on behalf of the Jewish people. Prior to that, Moshe was the one who took the Jews out of Egypt. Hashem promised Moshe that the Jews would always believe in him. In fact, in this parasha, Behaalosecha, we learn that whenever he wanted to, he had an open door policy with God. He could speak to Hashem anytime that he wanted, without any prerequisites. In this parasha, we also learned that Moshe would be in a position to share of his own divine spirit with 70 elders and lose nothing of his greatness in the process. We're also told that Moshe, compared to the people, would be similar to a mother nursing her child. Moshe, like the mother, the one who feeds and nourishes the people who are just like children compared to him. So when you look at Moshe's resume and you see all these incredible things that not just people said about him, but Hashem said about him, so realistically, how is it feasible that Moshe should feel humble in the face of every single person on the planet? How? Doesn't seem to make any sense. What the Rebbe will do is he'll first share an insight that is already previously discussed in Chassidus, and then later on he'll introduce a new revolutionary insight. So the classic Hasidic answer and explanation that is given is Moshe knew how great he was. Of course, and he understood and he appreciated that he had certain talents and abilities that the average person and even the above average person did not have. Nevertheless, he remained absolutely humble in the face of every person because he used a very simple formula. Because he appreciated a simple principle. Whatever I have, all my assets, my abilities, my greatness, my spirituality, is a gift that Hashem gave me. So Moshe was able to use a very simple formula. Hashem gave me these abilities. Had he given any other person the same gifts that he gave me, that person would be as great as I am. And not only that, in fact, Moshe said to himself, who knows? Maybe if you had been given my powers, you would have done a better job expressing them. Maybe you would have even superseded me. And that is the classical explanation of how Moshe remains humble in the face of every person in spite of being a superhuman. Because he recognized that to be a superhuman was not of his doing, it was Hashem's incredible generosity to him. Had Hashem been generous to anybody else, they would have been as good as him, if not better. So what gave him the right to feel superior to any other person who just happened not to have those gifts? So now the way that we've looked at it now, we've now explained how it is that Moshe could be humble, and effectively that means that we've pretty much reinforced the simplistic understanding of humility. What is the simplistic understanding of humility? Is that a person will say, I feel somehow humbled, somehow less, somehow diminished compared to other people. That's usually how we understand humility, right? That a person says, oh, no, I'm not special. I'm not better than anybody else. In fact, maybe I'm even not as good as the next person. The way that Moshe has framed his particular approach, as we've just discussed it, that's exactly what he does. Oh, I'm not greater than anybody else. In fact, I might be less than somebody else. If somebody else had been gifted, they may have outdone me. Now, if you pay very close attention to the explanation, you'll notice exactly this point. You see, if Moshe's formula was, if his thinking was, look, I've been gifted, then that would only mean I cannot feel superior to anybody else because I've been gifted. It's not of my doing. But he added another layer to this. It's not just to say, I'm gifted and therefore I dare not become arrogant. What he said was, if somebody else had been gifted like me, they may have used their gifts better than I have. Therefore, he feels classic humility. Perhaps I'm not as worthy as the next person. So there's a 2-point process over here. I'm not arrogant because what I have is a gift. And I feel perhaps less worthy than the next person because I don't know that with the same gifts, I don't know that they may not have done a better job than I have. So he feels almost, so to speak, a rung lower than the next person. That's the explanation that is classically offered in Hasidic teachings, but it raises a big question. The primary advantage that Moshe has that makes him unique, unlike any other human being who ever lived, is that he was the greatest prophet ever. So his biggest asset is prophecy. In fact, that's actually described in this week's Torah portion, that he is the greatest and no person would ever rival the level of prophecy that Moshe enjoyed. Now, you don't train to become a prophet. That's totally Hashem's prerogative. Hashem gifts you with prophecy. You can't say, I'm working at this and I'm a prophet in progress and give me a few more years and I'll get there. It's a gift that Hashem gives you. And if it is a gift, if it's a gift that is completely outside of your hands, then it doesn't really make logical sense to say, well, if somebody else was given prophecy, maybe they would have used their prophecy better than I did. It doesn't work like that. Prophecy is what Hashem gives you at every prophetic moment. You don't choose, okay, now I'm going to have a prophecy. You choose to be in a position that you deserve the prophecy when it comes, but you can't choose to have the prophecy. So if that's the case, so then that takes us back to square one. You see, if we want to say that Moshe was never arrogant because he appreciated that what he had was a gift, perfect. He's not arrogant that he's a prophet because he realizes that to be a prophet was Hashem's doing and he had really no part to play in it. He's just the grateful recipient. But that doesn't mean that he could say, and therefore I am less than the next guy who's not a prophet. No, you're not less. You are a prophet. He's not a prophet. If you want to say that I'm a wise person and I've used my intelligence well, but maybe somebody else who is as wise as me would use it better, okay, then you can say I'm more humble than them because they might have done a better job. You cannot use that argument with prophecy. You can't say, well, if they were given a prophecy, maybe they would have used the prophecy better than I did. No, that's not how prophecy works. So we're actually back to square one, and we understand how Moshe was not arrogant, but we don't understand how Moshe felt humbled by others. So to try and understand this, we're going to go off the topic of Moshe and our Torah portion. We're going to spend the bulk of the Sikha examining this piece at the end of the tractate Sota, where there's a debate around the concept of humility. So even though we go off topic for a little bit, we're not off topic at all. In fact, what we're doing is just fleshing out the nature of humility so that we can resolve this question. So we'll find the answer to this based on what is taught at the end of the tractate Sota b'Mishnah Sham. The Mishnah says that when Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, the greatest leader at the end of the early Talmudic period, the period known as the Mishnah, when he passed away, so the sages made a comment that was the end, from that time and on, there was no longer real humility or true fear of sin. That's what the Mishnah says. So the Talmud then comments on this Mishnah, the Gemara comments on the Mishnah, and brings two opinions. Rav Yosef says, no, you should not say that after the passing of Rabbi there was no more humility in the world, because there's me. In other words, as Rashi says, and I am humble. And Rav Nachman says you shouldn't say that when Rabbi passed away there's no more fear of sin in the world, because there's me, which implies obviously that he's somebody who fears sin. Okay, straight away you should have questions rushing through your mind. What? The obvious question is, how can you say, I am humble? Surely that defeats the purpose of being humble. But the Rebbe is going to ask different questions that are a little bit more technical first, before we address that question. Question number 1. Shnei Rav Yosef Rav Nachman hoy b'dor echad. U'mistaver shekol echad mehem hikir b'mayla shel chaveroi. Rav Nachman and Rav Yosef were contemporaries. They knew each other, and in all likelihood, they knew each other's greatness. In fact, we have proof of that. We find in various places in the Gemara that Rav Nachman and Rav Yosef each give accolades to each other, and they highlight the greatness that each of them has. Rav Yosef highlights the particular way that Rav Nachman learns in a certain discussion that they have, and Rav Nachman gives Rav Yosef the title of Sinai, which means somebody who has a broad, expansive knowledge of the whole of Torah. So they knew each other, and they knew each other's greatness. So then it seems weird. Like Rav Yosef says, the only part of that Mishnah that needs to be corrected is the part about humility, because there's me and I'm humble. Well, he should have said, correct the whole Mishnah, because there's me who is humble and there's Rav Nachman who fears sin. And vice versa. Rav Nachman should have said, delete that Mishnah, because there's me who fears sin and there's Rav Yosef who is humble. It's quite strange that each one of them only talks about their own apparent greatness. Very strange, not the behavior you would expect from great people. In fact, on the contrary, if they're willing to highlight their own greatness, you would expect that they'd be much quicker to highlight the greatness of the next person, because that is the way of pious individuals. So our first question is, why does each draw attention only to their own asset and does not at all mention the other person's greatness? Question number 2. The butler לגבי מעלה אחת ולא יקום לטיסן כל הבעבד שבייס ברבי מכלל שסוברני שהשנייה בutler ירא אסכית לרב יוסף another Rav Nachman. Now we're going to take it to the next level. The fact that Rav Yosef does not say, hey, there are still people who fear sin like my colleague Rav Nachman, implies that he does not feel that Rav Nachman qualifies as somebody who fears sin. And the fact that Rav Nachman says, whoa, don't say that there's no more fear of sin because there's me, but he does not say anything about humility, that insinuates that he does not consider Rav Yosef to be truly humble. Now, isn't that interesting? Not only do they not highlight each other's greatness, they seem to ignore it, almost as if to say, I think your self-assessment is wrong. I don't think you're as humble as you think. I don't think you're as God-fearing as you think. Now, there's another layer to this, you see, because in this Gemara, in certain editions of the Gemara, there's a little piece that's added on at the end. It actually comes from a different Gemara in Avodah Zarah. So there's a piece that's added, attributed to Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair, who says that humility is a prerequisite for fear of sin. Which implies that humility is level A, let's call it, which is an intro to fear of sin, that is level B, a higher level. Excuse me. It's a logical question to pose now against Rav Nachman. Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair teaches us that first comes humility, then you graduate from humility to fear of sin. Rav Nachman seems to be saying there still is fear of sin, because look at me, I fear sin. There is no longer humility because he doesn't draw attention to Rav Yosef's position. Now, that's illogical. How could there be fear of sin if there is no humility, when we know that humility is the prerequisite to fear of sin? Okay, so what have we got at this point in time? A very strange setting of these two rabbis who knew each other, and each seems to ignore the other one's greatness, and therefore insinuates that the other one's greatness actually is no longer, it's not what they think it is. You think you're fearful of sin, but you're really not, and you think that you're very humble, but you're really not. And there's an additional question on Rav Nachman's thinking, seeing as the sequence goes first humility and then fear of sin. How could he possibly suggest that he has fear of sin, but his colleague does not have humility, as if humility is no longer available? We'll offer a potential answer to this, a potential resolution, which the Rebbe will not be satisfied with. What we've quoted, that the gradual process is first humility and then fear of sin, that follows the view of a man called Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair. There's another great sage called Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi who learns it the other way around. He says the gradual process is first there's fear of sin, and that brings you to have the sense of humility. So maybe Rav Nachman follows that view, and he says it is possible to have fear of sin without achieving humility. That's why he says, I am still a candidate because I have fear of sin, but Rav Yosef, who believes that he's humble, it's not possible. Humility no longer exists. And that would also follow Yushitas HaYushami Shkolim Shesosam Lefigir Satosvus Sheyiras Chet Kedemus Umavia Lidei Anova. And the truth is that if that would be the view of Rav Nachman, it would also be supported by the Jerusalem Talmud that seems to say the same thing. First you get to the level of fear of sin, and then you have to graduate to the level of humility. So it is possible that there's still fear of sin in the world, and there is no humility left in the world. Well, if we're going to go with that, then we'd have to explain as follows. Shepluktas Rabbi Yosef Rav Nachman tisni anova oi loi tisni yiraschet tluya b'machloikas anal. Rabbi Yosef to come shiyaschet batav loi anova hainu mishum desfirle shiyaschet gedola me anova. Rav Nachman to come shabata rak anova sfirle hifech shanova nalis Yosef yiraschet. So then we would explain it like this. Rav Yosef goes to the view of Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair, who says that first, you have to experience humility in order to achieve fear of sin. Therefore, we have reached a generation where people can only get to the rung of humility and no longer to the rung of fear of sin. So I am the sign that there is still humility in the world, but Rav Nachman is wrong to think that he has fear of sin because that is no longer available. Whereas Rav Nachman says, no, I follow the opinion of Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi and the Jerusalem Talmud that says the rung of fear of sin is accessible, but the rung of humility is beyond that and no longer something we can attain. So I am still in touch with fear of sin. I can represent fear of sin, but you, Rav Yosef, have not, you're wrong in your self-assessment and you don't have the humility that the Talmud is actually talking about. So it would be a nice, convenient way to settle this issue. We say we have two rabbis disagreeing, and their disagreement is based on a prior disagreement of two other earlier sages, and that would be a perfectly normal way that the Torah resolves things, or at least I should say that the Gemara resolves things, except that it has two problems. Number one, Aval Kasha Lo Makeh. Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi. It's a bit far-fetched. That's the bottom line. There is a principle that we have in Judaism where we say that just because I don't know that something happened didn't mean it doesn't happen. But you can scour the whole of the Talmud and you will not find any evidence that links Rav Nachman and Rabbi Yosef and their divergent views with Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi and Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair and their divergent views. Now that's atypical. Usually what would happen is if you have two Gemara age sages disagreeing and a similar argument already exists in a prior Mishnah age debate, usually the Gemara would make that connection. It doesn't. So that already makes it seem unlikely that Rav Nachman and Rabbi Yosef have aligned themselves with Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair and Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi. But it's more than that. Secondly, Matzinish Rav Nachman hoya mechsidei Bavel, Rav Yosef hoya Sinai shusei der halimud b'nei Ma'arava. We have evidence in the Talmud that Rav Nachman was considered a classic Babylonian-style scholar, Whereas Rav Yosef is called Sinai, which is this very broad, expansive overview of the whole of Torah, which is considered a classic Israel-style scholar. ולפי הנ"ל הרי הוא בהפך. רב יוסף דספילר שרק ירס חטא באתו נקה פשיטה הבבלי, ורב נחמן דסוף שרק הנובה באתו כירושלמי, in which case this attempt of ours to try and align two rabbis with two earlier rabbis falls flat. Because Rav Nachman is a classic Babylonian scholar, and we're trying to argue that he took the view of the Jerusalem Talmud, which is the Israeli style of learning, which was not his style of learning. And equally, we want to suggest over here that Rav Yosef, who's a classic Israel-style scholar, suddenly and inexplicably would have adopted the Babylonian style of learning to say that actually only humility still is attainable, but no longer fear of sin. And that's it's one thing to say we have no precedent that they are divided along the lines of their predecessors. But it's really a stretch to say, they've actually temporarily switched sides and adopted a view that is contrary to their whole methodology of how they learn. That is really too far-fetched. So, move on. Obviously, it is possible you're allowed to be flexible as a sage. You can sometimes take the other view. Of course, that's fair. You're right. At any time you and I have a debate, I could say, okay, listen, I see your point of view, and that's absolutely acceptable, and nobody would in any way, shape, or form think that I had compromised on my value system or given up on my particular understanding. No, I can agree with you. That's acceptable. But what's weird and what doesn't make any sense is that I'll suddenly take your side and you'll take my side, and then we'll argue each other's sides. That does not make sense. So to say that Rav Yosef would suddenly argue the Babylonian approach and Rav Nachman would disagree with him, specifically choosing the Israel style approach, that is too far-fetched. So if that's the case, we still have our two questions. Why do each of these rabbis ignore the assets of their colleague and only speak about themselves? I am the one who proves this Mishnah wrong. And by extension, the fact that they don't mention each other's greatness seems to imply that they don't believe the other one was correct. Why? So now we'll get to the question that you all had on your mind right from the beginning, and this will help open the path for understanding what's going on over here. The most glaring question in this Gemara is, how could Rav Yosef say, don't quote that there's no more humility left in society, because there is. Here I am, Exhibit A. Is that not in itself antithetical to humility? And as is often the case, when we try and answer a question, particularly a question that is that apparent and that open, we say, yes, of course, you had the question because you did not understand the definition of the terminology we're dealing with. Most people misunderstand humility. Most people think that humility means I'm a nothing, I'm a nobody. That's how most people think humility. And that's not called anova, that's called shiflus. Shiflus means lowliness. Sometimes a person has shiflus because they truly are lowly. I really have nothing to offer. I don't feel I have any talents. I don't have any wisdom. Sometimes it's not true, but it's their perception. They haven't recognized their talents or their wisdom yet. Either way, anova, humility, is not denial of your greatness. Let's repeat that. Humility is not denial of your greatness. We've already seen this in the example of Moshe, that humility is a recognition that you have greatness. So you actually have greatness, and you know that you have greatness. There's nothing wrong with that. For some reason, people are ashamed over the fact that they have talents. It's nothing to be embarrassed of. Those are your God-given talents. It's a great gift. Use it. Don't become arrogant because of it, but don't pretend you don't have it in the so-called display of humility. That's not humility. Humility is not dishonest. Humility means I know what I have and I appreciate what I have. So why am I humble? I don't give myself credit for what I have. That's humility. I don't give myself the credit for what I have. Because the person says, I didn't choose to have talents. Hashem gave me a gift. How dare I feel arrogant over something that is not of my making? More than that. And not only am I not arrogant, I'm actually humbled by the thought that at any time, theoretically, Hashem could, theoretically, take everything I have away from me and give it to somebody else. And that somebody else might do a far better job with those assets than what I have done. That's humility. Humility is, I know what I have. I appreciate what I have. I try and use what I have. I'm never arrogant because of what I have. And I always imagine everybody else having the opportunity, having been given the opportunity, would have outdone me. That's humility. So Rav Yosef, who says, I'm humble, he's not saying I'm humble as in, look at me, pay attention everybody, I am the example of humility. No, he's just being in touch with his own reality. It's an honest moment. It's a completely objective, neutral statement of fact. It's not bragging, it's not attention seeking. This is who I am. I'm somebody who has, thank God, amazing talent, God-given, and I recognize the fact that it's God-given, and I don't look at anybody else as anything less than me because they may have done a better job. In fact, Rav Yosef looks at the next person and says, it's quite possible that the next person, given what I have, might even be more humble than me. Not only might have achieved more than me, they might have even been more humble than me, more willing to accept the greatness of others than I am willing to accept. So his statement, I am humble, is a true, honest, genuine statement. I am humble. I always look to see that others possibly would have done better than me, and they may have even been more humble than I am. This relates to something that the Gemara tells us in Sanhedrin, that Rav Yosef would say about himself, that I am like the great harvest that is yielded because of the hard work of the ox that pulls the plow. What was he trying to say? What do you think? Does the ox make things grow? How do you say the harvest is the result of the ox? It's nothing to do with the ox. It's because there were seeds that were put into the ground, and the nutrients in the ground allowed those seeds to grow. The ground made the crop grow. The ox only prepared the way. All the ox did was create an environment within which the earth and the soil and the seed could interact in order to grow. But the ox didn't make it grow. That's what Rav Yosef thought about himself. I'm just the ox. I don't make anything happen. I don't make anything happen. I open a book and I learn because that's what I'm supposed to do. Because I open the book and I learn, that doesn't make me a genius. Hashem made me a genius. If I have a photographic memory, or if I have this incredible oversight that I can retain information from the full, because he was Sinai, right? He had this broad, expansive knowledge. I didn't do that. I just read the information. I study the information. Then Hashem gifts me that it turns into this incredible knowledge base. And so various statements that Rav Yosef made about himself are all on the same theme. He says, I carry with me bundles worth of Mishnah. He said, I'm like a wheat agent. Everybody needs wheat. So everybody's going to come to me. What's he saying? I didn't make the wheat. I didn't do any of this. I created an opportunity. I used whatever skills I had, and Hashem blessed me that those skills would yield a result that is not in my hands. That's how Rav Yosef saw himself. So even his humility I didn't make myself humble. I worked on myself. I did what Hashem wants. And what came out of that was an overwhelming sense of the fact that whatever I've got is Hashem's gift. So why should I be not only arrogant, why should I even think of myself as anything different to the next person? In fact, I constantly walk around imagining if Hashem had given the gifts that he gave to me, to that person, they would be far superior. Okay, so now we have a different perspective on what humility is, and now we have a different perspective on what Rav Yosef meant when he said, hey, there are still humble people around like me. We're going to very quickly discover that there's still a problem with this. It doesn't sit just so comfortably. Why? One of the things that we're taught is that when a person learns a lot of Torah, the Torah forms a protective aura around the person and helps us to be more resilient against our own evil urges, against our Yetzer Hara, and keeps us from sin. Torah actually keeps us from sin. Now, the only way that the Torah becomes this protective gear to stop a person from sinning is because you've got to learn the Torah. That's not a gift. In other words, the protection against sin that is achieved through the learning Torah, that's not Hashem's gift. That's your effort. You have to do that. You have to work on that. You have to earn that. So Hashem's gifts allowed him to, when he learned, really move at an incredible pace and collect huge amounts of information. That's the brocha. But he still had to learn. And how do you get protected from sin? Because you learn. So that he does own. He can't dismiss and say, oh, that's Hashem's doing. That's Hashem's great gift to me, that I'm a righteous individual because I'm protected from sin. No. That's not Hashem's gift. That's your doing. You worked on yourself. You learned. You invested. So therefore, you're in a position now that you're protected from sin. So now we have a question, Rabbi Yosef. How can you be so humble? You say that the reason you are humble is because you believe that everything that you have is Hashem's gift. It's not true. Not everything that you have is Hashem's gift. Some of what you have, you earned. The fact that you have this unique protection against sin, which is the result of learning Torah, you learned that Torah. God did not learn that Torah for you. God gifted you how much your Torah learning would work. In other words, when you open the book, how quickly you would grasp the information, how easily you'd be able to cross-reference from one part of the Talmud to the other. That's God's gift. But the actual sitting on the bench and learning, that's you. And that gave you the edge over the next person. You are unique because of your achievements. Now, how does that fit into humility? What are you going to say? Oh, if somebody else had been given the opportunity to learn as much as me? No. You did it. You actually did it. And this would be similar to say, can you imagine, a person comes in and says, you should be humble compared to animals. Well, why compared to animals? Because if an animal had sat down and learned Torah, well, that would be ridiculous, obviously, right? Goes without saying. You can't make a comparison between something that doesn't do the work with something that does, or something that can't achieve with something that does. So you can't make a comparison between yourself and other people who haven't invested themselves, who haven't put in the effort, and say, oh, I'm more humble than them because what? Because I've achieved. I actually have achieved. So this is critical information now, because this is going to bring us to a totally different understanding, the more revolutionary approach that the Rebbe will give us on what humility really means. But there are a few steps we have to go through. So Rav Yosef's opinion is, look, let me explain this to you. I'll explain to you what's going on over here. The fact that the Torah protects me from sin is still not of my doing. I learn Torah because that's what I'm instructed to do. So I sit down and I learn Torah. And then when I learn Torah, I don't change because I've learned Torah. I don't become a sin retardant person. No, I'm still me. The Torah as a gift from Hashem surrounds me to protect me, who is, by the way, predisposed to sin, to be protected from doing that sin. You know what? It's still Hashem's gift. So therefore the same logic applies. When Rav Yosef says, I learned Torah and I became a Torah genius, but it's nothing to do with me, I just opened a book. Hashem gave me the gift of an incredible intellect, so I'm not going to take any personal responsibility for that or let it go to my head. Neither. The same logic applies to the fact that he is now protected from sin. I didn't make myself protected from sin. I learned Torah. That's what I did. And anybody can do this. Anybody can open a book and anybody can learn Torah. The fact that once I learned Torah, now Hashem gifted me with this immunity to sin, that is again Hashem's gift, not something I can take responsibility or claim credit for. So Rav Yosef's opinion across the board is that the nature of humility is that what I get for what I do is a gift. What I get to allow me to do it is a gift. There's a little piece called what I do. But the results, the capacity, the abilities, all God-given, and I dare not take credit for it. In fact, on the contrary, I should see myself as less than every other person around, because I don't know, maybe the other person around would have done a far, far better job than I have done. Now we have an explanation why Rav Nachman believes that there is still yiras chet, fear of sin. Look at me, I fear sin. But there is no longer humility, because look at Rav Yosef, he's not humble as he makes out to be, because they're actually working on different appreciations of how the system works. Different appreciations of what humility means. They're actually not disagreeing with each other about fact. They're disagreeing with each other about perception of what constitutes humility. Rav Nachman is not being disparaging to his colleague Rav Yosef and saying, you're not as humble as you make out. He's saying you and I have totally different appreciations of what humility entails. So when you look at things through your perspective, you're quite comfortable that you still have humility. When I look at it from my perspective, I'm not quite sure that that actually qualifies as humility. So Rav Nachman Poligal Rav Yosef Asava Shinur da Torah Pol Shinoi Be'adam Aloin Da She'ena Shaykh Lechet V'Melo Rav Yosef Yochel Yos Onav. Rav Yosef says, I learned Torah, and then Hashem gives me a gift that I'm protected because of the Torah that I learned, and I'm not going to sin, so I can't take credit for it. Rav Nachman says, no, that's not how it worked. You changed. You became a different person through your Torah learning, not because Hashem superimposed something onto you. You changed. You achieved. Isn't that fascinating? We started off this conversation thinking that Rav Nachman was disrespectful to Rav Yosef and saying, you don't actually fear sin. You're not actually humble. You're not actually humble. Turns out that's not the case. Turns out he's saying, you're not humble because humility in your assessment is that everything is a gift from God. And I'm telling you, you did things that you actually achieved. And if you actually achieved them, you can't feel I'm less than the next person who did not achieve. You achieved. You worked. You succeeded. Your whole theory of humility was to say, and if somebody else had been given the same talents, they may have succeeded. Yeah, but you have succeeded. So that's no longer an argument in Rav Nachman's world. Now let's use that, let's flip it around for a second and look at how Rav Yosef then would disagree with Rav Nachman about his self-assessment. So now we can also, just from the other angle, from the other perspective, understand why Rav Yosef felt that Rav Nachman's argument that he has fear of sin is also not actually the way Rav Nachman sees it. Rav Nachman has a very interesting history that when he was very young, his mother ran into some astrologers and they said, your son is destined to be a thief. She was obviously a Jewish mother. She was beside herself. So, lo shavakte giluy reisha, omre kasi reisha chi heichet yitaba lach emes et dishmayo bor rachmi. Bakish rachmi shlo yishtu b'choy yitzahara. So what did she do? She made sure that from the youngest age, her little boy, Rav Nachman, who became obviously the great sage Rav Nachman, should never have a moment in his life where his head was not covered. And she educated him as he grew up. Always keep your head covered so that you will always have fear of heaven and always daven that Hashem should have mercy on you. The Gemara says that on one occasion his hood slipped, like he had a cloak with a hood kind of thing, slipped off his head, and the next thing he suddenly felt an urge to steal. So Rav Nachman's personal experience was that there was an external force that kept him on the straight and narrow. For whatever reason it is, Hashem had predetermined that he would have a predisposition towards theft, and he had to be protected. To say that you're a person who fears sin does not equal that you don't sin. It's very different. Maybe a person doesn't sin because they're worried about the consequences. Maybe a person doesn't sin because they're worried about their teacher. So fear of sin is not that you're worried about what's going to happen. It means you're afraid of the sin itself. So Rav Yosef looks at his colleague Rav Nachman and says, hang on a second, the reason you don't sin is because you've got something on your head. And the reason you don't sin is because you keep davening to Hashem to have mercy on you. That doesn't tell me that you're afraid of sinning. In fact, on the contrary, you wearing that yarmulke on your head has to reawaken your special protection against sin from minute to minute. And even that's not good enough. You still got to daven over and above that. That tells me you are not fundamentally afraid of sin. You just have a methodology of self-protection against sin. But there's a kol zelo nasa shinu boy she'nikra yerei chet, ki im rak shenitza me'asiyas hachet, val derech shitas Rav Yosef hanal bifulas haTorah shematzina me'asiyas hachet. And therefore, Rav Yosef says to Rav Nachman, I don't think that you fear sin. I just think you know how to avoid sin. So we've got two opinions now, right? And the purpose of the thrust of our conversation is not really to discuss Rav Nachman's fear of sin as much as it is to discuss Rav Yosef's concept of humility, because we want to understand Moshe's humility. So from here to the end of the Sikha, we're going to focus primarily on the concept of humility. At this point in time, Rav Yosef, we've said, is of the view that he learns Torah and then Hashem does something to him because he learns Torah to protect him from sin. Whereas Rav Nachman says to him, no, your Torah learning is your achievement, and your achievement keeps you from sin, and therefore you can't really call yourself humble, because you'll never look at somebody else and say, well, if you had. They hadn't. They actually didn't achieve. So that debate is going to reflect in a different debate that Rav Yosef and Rav Nachman have in a completely different area of Jewish law, but it will help us to understand better what it is that they're fighting about, arguing about. Fighting is not a good word. Hanal, Rav Yosef Rav Nachman pligi im limud haTorah v'al derech kisa harosh v'tefila poel shinu be'adam shli yashayach lechet asher maneh matz mipula matzinu b'mesechta brachos. So basically what you're seeing over here is this. Rav Yosef says, I haven't changed. The Torah is protecting me. Rav Nachman says, you have changed. Likewise, Rav Yosef says to Rav Nachman, you are not fundamentally afraid of sin. You are being protected by external forces. Rav Nachman says, I am afraid of sin. So they're arguing basically about whether things change from an external force or not. Let's see how that plays out in a completely different area of law. So the Gemara in Brochus tells us that a person may not say the Shema in the vicinity, of urine, unless it's first been diluted with water. How much water do you need to dilute the offensive material before you can say the Shema? That is a debate between these two same protagonists, between Rav Nachman and Rav Yosef. Rav Nachman Sover, Shabi Makri yesh bo kfar meraglayim bo lat l'techem mayim, oz das be zakai tzorch lat l'techem revis, av b'tchila shekod ma'mayim l'meraglayim v'spat mehem b'mayim kol shehein. Why? Ki rishon rishon shadayf l'techem mayim is battle. According to Rav Nachman, if there is already this urine, and now you want to pour water into it to dilute it, you need a quantity that is called a revi'is. It's a halachic quantity of water, whatever it works out to. 86 milliliters or whatever it works out to. If it's the other way around, if there's already a pool of water and then somebody goes and they urinate into the water, then even the smallest amount of water is enough to neutralize the offensive material, because as each bit of liquid enters the water, so it gets neutralized, and so it gets neutralized. That is the view of Rav Nachman. Whereas Rav Yosef Savra Shel Rabbi Zaka Gam B'tchila Tzorich L'Revius Mayim V'Avid Uvda Am Rabbi Yosef Hashamei Eis Rabbi Yosef D'Mayik Rabbi Zaka Afilu B'tchila. Whereas Rav Yosef says, look, we all agree that if you've got to try and pour water to dilute this, what we call meraglayim, then everybody agrees how much you need. But I believe that even if you already have water and now a person wanted to urinate into that water, the original amount of water also has to be a revius. It has to be a set amount of water, not like Rav Nachman says any amount of water is good enough. Why? What are they arguing about? What's the difference? There's got to be an underlying perspective here. Shlomo shepluktas Rav Nachman Rav Yosef im betchilat tzarich levis mayim levatas maraglayim plukta klolis boifen abaylos v'apaulo shel taro kedusha v'chulu b'makom b'boinim tzois. They're not arguing over here about different kinds of fluids. They're arguing about a principle, a core principle that relates to purity and impurity. How much of a pure substance or a holy substance do you need before it starts to make a difference? Shitas Rav Nachman, the Maim Tarim Afilu Kol Shen Koinam Amokim Oisim B'Kavod Bo V'Lachem Kama Batel Bahen. So is this an issue of size, quantity, or is this an issue of the quality? In other words, Rav Yosef seems to imply you need a certain quantum of the good stuff in order to neutralize the bad stuff. And according to Rav Nachman, it seems that good stuff is in and of itself so powerful that it naturally has an impact on whatever comes into its space. Okay, so that's basically what the debate is going to be, whether this is an issue of quantity or quality, but we're going to explore it deeper and try and understand. Now you go into So Rab Nachman is of the view, he says, listen, there's water in this space. Water is good substance. It represents purity. Now you're going to trickle into that an inappropriate substance, a so-called impure substance. Because the good substance is there first, it defines the reality of the space. The whole space is now considered pure. Whatever you add into that space will change and become neutralized by that purity. Rav Yosef says, no, it doesn't work that way. There's no magical formula that things change because of the environment. You have to have enough force. You have to have enough water to overwhelm the offensive material. So Rav Nachman says, look, when I do something, I put a yarmulke on my head, I change. Like that little bit of holiness is enough to change me. I am now somebody who fears sin. You, Rav Yosef, you've learned Torah. That little bit of Torah changes you. You are now somebody who's protected from doing what's wrong. So therefore you can't say, I'm so humble about it. No, you did it. You changed yourself. Rav Yosef says that's not how it works. Rav Yosef says you've got to kind of overwhelm the space. You've got to bring something into the space to impact the space, but the space doesn't change. The person doesn't change. I am not a different person. I'm being protected by Hashem's good graces through the Torah. You are not a different person. You are not a fearful of sin person. You're just being protected by this unique combo of wearing a yarmulke and davening. Okay, now a little bit of a technical point, a little bit more abstract for a minute, and that will help us pull it all together. Now we're going to get to the crux. Now we have to understand. According to Rav Nachman, when you learn Torah, it changes you, and you can take the credit for that. You can say, I have changed myself. I've shifted myself through the Torah learning that I have done to become a different person who is immune to impurity. So Rav Nachman has a big issue with Rav Yosef. How can you claim that you are humble? You've achieved your learning. And if you've achieved something, you have to take credit for what you've achieved, and you can't pretend that somebody else has achieved more than you. Well, then how does Rav Nachman handle Rabbi himself, or Moshe for that matter, who were humble? because same process. They also learned Torah, especially Moshe, who received the Torah from Sinai. I mean, the whole Torah is named after Moshe. Surely then, by Rav Nachman's thinking, they should not be humble. They should have to acknowledge that they achieved things because they learned Torah and the Torah changed them. ויש לומר האביר בזה דין המבואר בליקוט התורה במחלוקת רבי פנחס בן יורי ורבי יהושע בן לוי אם הנביא למטה מירסכת שהנביא גדול מכולן שכמה הנביא הן. The answer to all of this, everything that we've been discussing until now, hinges on something that the first Chabad Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe, writes in Likutei Torah, his comprehensive spiritual insights into the parasha of the week, that he says, you know why there's a debate between Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi and Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair as to what is the higher and the preceding level, humility or fear of sin, is because there's different kinds of humility. Humility is not homogeneous. There's not one size fits all humility. There are two profoundly different kinds of humility. In technical terms, in spiritual technical terms, the entry level humility reaches the spiritual level called bina, deep understanding, and the superior level of humility is at the level called keser, the transcendent so-called crown over and above all of the 10 spiritual forces that run this world. Or signon poshet yoiser. So the Rebbe helps us understand this in simpler language. Anova shebivchinas bina hi anova shal pi cheshben v'tam and commotion is boiled by anova shayitzam Moshe Rabbi Yosef pnei shechoshav sheim haya luzulasa kechus v'chushim elo haya megil l'mayla yoser. The entry level, the first level of humility is a rational humility. I think about it rationally and I realize I have amazing talents that Hashem gave me as a gift, and I rationally appreciate that it's possible somebody else having the same gifts would have done better. Therefore, I'm humbled. Rationally based humility. And then, but there's a far superior kind of humility, and that is that my essence is humility. I'm not humble because of any reason. I'm not humble because of any calculation that I've made. I'm not humble because of any way that I think about other people. It is the core of my being. My whole entity, my whole self is humility. That's my core. What that would basically mean is that there's a humility that has no rational basis at all, and we can prove that such a thing exists. How? The Talmud in Megillah tells us that Hashem is also humble, and that wherever you find Hashem's greatness, you actually find His humility. Now, why is Hashem humble? What's Hashem going to say? If anybody else had been given the right to be God, there would have been a better God than me. That's ridiculous. That is heretical. So if we say that Hashem is humble, it is not because of any calculation or any rational process that Hashem has made. It is a fundamental core element of His being, the capacity to be humble. שישנה הנובה כזה שהיא בלי שום חשבון כלל הנובה בעצם, ועל דרך מורים וקודש אשכון וסדקה ושפל רוח, אם היו שלא נמצא שום מים בדקה ושפל רוח, גם מורים וקודש בכל זה רואי צולישכון וסדקה ושפל רוח דווקא. So that tells us that there is a principle of a real intrinsic humility. Like, for example, the verse that says, I am Hashem who is great and aloof, and I dafka come down to the one who is humble and small. Not because there's a value in that small person, not because there's a logical reason why Hashem should do so, but because the most powerful kind of humility is humility that is intrinsic to the essence of someone's being. So Moshe has both. Moshe, first of all, he has that kind of humility to say, look, I know there are a whole lot of things, greatness, wisdom, leadership, etc., that I have, that Hashem gave me as a gift, and I know if He had given it to anybody else, they may have used it better. Therefore, I'm humble in a rational, bina way. But in addition to that, but then Moshe looks at prophecy and he says, prophecy, there's no way, there's no logical thing to say, somebody else may have been a better prophet than me. So why am I humble with regards to prophecy? Because that's who I am. Humility is what I am. It's not something I do. It's not a trait that I've learnt. It's not a perception of how I see people. It is the essence of my being. That's real humility. That's the kind of humility you don't have to learn, you don't have to practice, you don't grow, you don't develop, you don't work it out. It's just there from day one. It is the essence of Moshe's being. That's why we say Moshe is the most humble person who ever lived. Not because he had the most extensive way of calculating how everybody else has some greatness in them, because he was incapable of anything else but humility. It's the essence and core of his being. Now we're taught in Chassidus that specifically using the Babylonian methodology of Torah learning, which is very complex and a lot of debate and exploration and arguments and counter-arguments, that actually takes us to the highest level of interaction with Hashem, which is called the Keser level. It's totally beyond the rational human experience. So now we know that the difference of opinion between Rav Yosef and Rav Nachman as to whether or not humility ceased with the passing of Rabbi is actually two different ways of which humility are we looking at. Rav Yosef Shoya Sinai said Alim to Yosham Sveri Shakavalas Amish Botla Novin Bchilas Novashim Saracheshman Bchilas Bina Rav Yosef, who had the Israeli methodology of Torah learning, which is that broad-based Bina, Sinai, very comprehensive, very rational approach, he says, look, the kind of humility that we are talking about is the humility which can be achieved through a rational process. I look at what I've got and I appreciate that they're gifts from Hashem, and then I see if somebody else had been given the same gifts, they may have done better than me. That kind of humility is always available at all times, in all generations, and therefore he says, don't tell us that there's no more humility because Rebbe passed away. There's still me. Rav Nachman on the other hand, he believes that the kind of humility we're looking for is humility that is intrinsic, that is the core of your being. You are nothing other than humble. And he says that ceased with the passing of Rebbe. That absolute humility is no longer something available. So yes, Rav Yosef is a very humble man, but he's not humble at the level that I, using my Babylonian approach, which takes you all the way to the highest levels, I don't believe that this kind of humility still exists. Now the Rebbe does not end off, well, at least the way it's in Likutei Sichos, with a specific lesson for us, but then again, the lesson should be incredibly obvious, that every one of us is supposed to do everything in our power to be as humble as we can. We may not have that intrinsic humility that Moshe Rabbeinu had, or even that Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi had. But Rav Yosef teaches us, every single one of us should constantly think about other people and say, wow, imagine if that person had the gifts that I have. Maybe they'd be a lot better than I am. I should show them respect.